Well, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome into Andrelczyk Amusement Academy. If this is your first time joining us here, I am a real life theme park designer who likes to play RCT and is super into coasters. So I started doing this series to teach how to build realistic coasters in the game and also hopefully teach you guys a thing or two about real life roller coasters out there and some of the history behind them. Today, we might teach you something new. We got some obscure coasters in here that we're going to take a look at. Today's theme is one-hit wonders. So the idea was coasters that are one of a kind in some way or another. So we have our 9 base coasters, as we always do, and depending on how things go, we might be able to squeeze a couple other ones in there. But what we have for today is the Chance Hyper GTX, the Intamin Aquatrax, the Intamin Fly Rider shuttle coaster, the Intamin Launched Wing Rider, which we've already done one of those back in the launch coaster stream, I think. One of those, but we're going to do another one. Then we have the Mack Emotion Coaster, which might be a new one for some people. We've got the Vekoma Wild Mouse. We've got the Skytrak Flyer, which may hopefully will be a new one for everybody, most folks. And then we're going to finish off with the Maurer Sohne Looping Coaster. So, as we always do, let's get into it with the coaster database. So first up is the Chance Hyper GTX. Hey Josh, there is only one of these. It's at Kentucky Kingdom in Louisville, and it is a darn shame that there is only one of these because this is a great coaster. Really, really big fan of this ride. I could easily see it being a top 10 coaster for a lot of people. It's up there for me. Um, so we're using sort of the older style, almost corkscrew looking track, but don't let it fool you. The ride is surprisingly smooth and has really great layout, a lot of airtime, a lot of directional changes, and a pretty compact site overall. You can kind of see the whole thing right here. Let's see if we can't pull up our POV video of this. We got a Coaster Force 1 in here. There we are. Thank you, as always, to Coaster Force for the POV videos. There we go. Right. So I just got to ride this again earlier this year, and it's still running great after a couple years now of having been open. But it's a small ride, so it's sort of on the same level as the Intamin Megalite, I suppose. So Intamin Megalite, the Mack Megalite, those sorts of things. So it is a really, really good coaster. Super incredibly strong airtime, especially on the last couple of hills, as you'll see. But we're talking a pretty dynamic layout here, so check this out. So we have a pretty steep drop here into a pretty high banked first corner, climbing up to some airtime. Then this high banked turnaround. Then it's a lot of these quick directional changes, little bits of airtime. A high banked corner there. It looks slow, but the thing is all the elements are really snappy, so it feels quick. And then we get down to this part here where we're gonna do this kind of outward bank thing and drop down, go right around this little shed and into these airtime hills here, which are absolutely wild. This little guy here in particular, and then kind of pull to the side and come up into the brakes here. So pretty short, pretty small on the whole, but it's a surprisingly good ride. So that's what we're going to start with today. So let's go on back. And one of the surprises today is that we are actually using the Chance Hyper GTX cars, which were made by Space K. So that was something that he was working on for a little while, and I am happy to put them to use today. So let's get started. We're going to use the corkscrew track. Now, the one downside of the corkscrew track, and something that we will at some point hopefully be able to solve, is the lack of banked corners on diving and climbing corners. So a little bit of a disappointment as far as that goes. So we're gonna have to do that, even though it looks a little rough sometimes, but that's okay. We're gonna have 5-car trains. We're gonna do 2 trains eventually, but for now we're gonna start with this. These are not very big rides, so you don't need to go very tall. So we could pull off this height here. Actually, that's probably a little too tall. Back this up a little bit. You all are having a fine Saturday morning or afternoon or evening, wherever you may be. So we are going to jump right into these airtime hills and airtime corners here. What I want to do is get a little bit of the kind of directional change thing going on, since I think that was what these rides did really well. At 50 there and 75 on the bottom. So let's keep this thing testing so we can kind of see where we sit as far as the overall speed goes. Not unrealistic, just intense. Or if you're intimate, it might be unrealistic and have to modify it, as I-305 had done. Let's see how well these carry their speed through here, because we might actually not be able to do a whole lot here, which I'm thinking we aren't. And that's a little too slow. We want to make sure we're keeping the speed here. Towards kind of this thing. I'm gonna do a section of flat track there. It's gonna look natural enough. Get a little turn around here. I think the ride at this scale, and RCT doesn't scale speed super well, is going to look maybe a little bit odd, but I think it's okay as far as those turnarounds go. I want to be able to change these directions quickly and have a lot of these little crossovers and other things. A little bit too far, I think, to get back under there. It would be kind of nice to have that 270 spiral, but that's not the best way to do this. Maybe we instead wrap around. Add there. We want to make sure as you're building rides, typically you want to avoid having too many corners that are all in the same direction. So you don't want a ride filled with all left-hand corners or right-hand corners. So here we got left, right, right again, then kind of left here, and then we'll go back to right. So just something to keep the variety going on these. Go ahead and also paint up our ride here. We'll pick the colors of the real thing at least, and look, I kind of wish I had the English palette do the that dark green that they've got in there. English palette remains my favorite palette, I would say. All right, let's can't quite get under there, which I kind of wanted to do. No, I don't think I want to do that smooth of a drop. Going slow enough there that I'm comfortable with. For this sort of thing. Question is, can we get back up to 35 crossover at this point? Not quite right away. That's going to be just a little bit too slow, which is fair. What we can do, though, is introduce just one more section worth of track here. Give us that clearance that we need to get through this space underneath. So let us still do some hills. We should start thinking about how we're going to head home right now. Let's back up on the other side and get in here with a brake run. So we'll do, that'll be reserved for the block brakes, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, and we'll do one more for 5. Let's turn this all the way around. Block brakes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. So the real one has its return run right up against the lift hill here, which I think we might be able to do. What we'll do end up is kind of coming with a flat bit here. There is that sort of weird-ish unbanked kind of corner as you come into the thing. So I'm trying to think here if we can't get under this one and over this one and then back down. Might be a little more easily said than done. So let's see what we can do. And we could also just kind of nest the inside of this corner. So depending on how this goes, which I don't quite want to keep it exactly the same just like that because I don't like this flat bit, but that's not a bad idea. Try and work towards that. Okay, we can't actually get out of there with a climbing piece because we are tight right in there. Okay. Question is just how close can we get? Need just one more tape to this. What we could also do is take this, just do a little bit of adjustment there during the banking. Should let us get this tied in, and it does. So the only thing here is that now we're on the ground here, so then this section would have to be lowered, because you never want your ride to sit right on the ground, as we've said before, because you want it to be able to have some supports and footers up underneath. Okay, so let's see how this is going. We're pretty compact in here, actually a little more compact than the real thing, I would say. But I don't think it's a bad layout. Okay, yeah, so we're hitting everything okay. So now we're just going to end with some airtime hills. And these can be small hills. Remember, the real one was awfully small. Kind of have this double step up, so we'll have this little bump into the turn and then a little bump into the brakes. Okay. So let's get in here. We're going to bump our speed of our lift hill up a little bit. Go in and replace our brakes. Blocks. Block 1, 2, and we'll put 1 out here too, so then we can clear the lift hill just a little bit earlier. Okay. There's a rumor that the coaster that Alabama Adventures is getting for next year is one of these. I don't necessarily believe it, but if it is, then I would be all for it. Green train and a purple train, just like the real one. All right, let's see how our speed does. 48 miles an hour through there. A little bit of up and down there. Still up at 40, so not too bad. 23. You don't really want to get too much lower than that as you're going through some of these elements. So that was why I did just the tight corner at the top of that one, just to give it a little bit of shortness to get around there, because we really don't, you don't want to keep it slow. You want to really maintain that speed as best as you can, so it's getting the ride up and then right back down. Not too bad, I would say. NCSO trains. The real thing, it depends kind of what you're looking for. The real one's got lap bars, so that would lead me to believe looping. Corkscrew probably has more of the big hood scoop, because that's one of the sort of signature things, whether it was intended or not, is the ride has this kind of super huge like front hood. It's it's really kind of obnoxious and long, and in my opinion looks kind of stupid also. So I could see that's not a bad idea, sorry. You could do a corkscrew front and then looping for all the rest, maybe. Here's a good shot of the trains. They're pretty low overall. So you're not going to have that like high seat back like you would have for the corkscrew. So maybe looping is the best option, I would think. It is a 2x2 arrangement for the cars, so you'd probably avoid hyper for that. So I would say between looping or corkscrew, I think you couldn't go wrong. Nice thing is the track is all standard stuff. See what our ratings are out of curiosity. Not too bad. Airtime 5.22. Negative G's. All right, we're -1 here, which is about correct, I would say. The real thing's probably pulling about a -1 through there. So not too bad. The I would say you could potentially go a little bit longer. You could also go higher if you wanted, but I think this is about the right scale for these things. You don't want to go too much higher. So the way that I was basing this off of is 2 of the steep bits and then a smooth kind of corner at the bottom. You could also use the big corner from the hyper if you wanted, but I kind of tend to prefer the little bit of a tighter pull out here, and then we're going to transition right into that curve. They are tight transitions, so it is totally okay to be doing these, you know, immediate bank to one side, then bank to the other, bank into things as you're coming out of the slope and things like that. So definitely a lot there. A little slow, you could make it faster. I think some of that is just the RCT visuals, and kind of our expectation of things is to run a little bit faster. I think from the POV, it almost does look a little bit slow, even though it doesn't feel like it, just because of the tightness of the train or the track. You could do a little bit of adjustment to the mass of the ride if you wanted to, but I don't think you have to by any means. All right, so we will call this one 1 in case anybody is playing along with the name redemption thing on here. That's 1 is what you use for that. All right, so that is number 1 right out of the way pretty quickly, actually. That one went very fast. Okay, so now a fun one, in my opinion anyway. So let's look at the aquatrax. So this is one of those that kind of almost became a meme in itself back when it first got going. Is that once the first one got built, everybody thought these were going everywhere. When Maverick got built at Cedar Point, everybody thought it was an Aquatrax. Like, it was a huge thing that everybody was going, "Oh yeah, no, it's an Aquatrax. It's got to be one of those." And then it kind of became a meme thing that any ride that nobody knew what it was is that it was an Aquatrax. What is an Aquatrax? Because there is only one of them. It is a an individual car ride. So here's the vehicle. It's a 2x4 arrangement, and it is a basically a launched and lift coaster that has a water element. Now, you don't actually get soaked on the ride. It just so happens that there's fountains close by and there's some water and right there at the bottom. The water height can be controlled a little bit, and you can get probably sprayed a little and misted as you're going along. So happens that Atlantis Adventure, which is the only one of these, is themed really, really well, and I think that's kind of part of it. Is to do this right, you need to theme it pretty well. I mean, look at that station; that's wild. So would love to see something kind of like this. Great little bump here. This one, kind of counterintuitive to kind of how I would even think about it, is that the ride starts with a launch and ends with the lift as the second half. I would kind of think of it as the other way around. You'd think you'd want to get the slower lift hill over first and then launch mid ride, but the lift hill is part of that. So let's jump on board here. We're gonna pick an old POV here, another Coaster Force POV from Gavin Jones. All right. Oop. Good. Good. All right. There we go. My fat fingers click something else. All right. So Atlantis Adventure. This is at Lotte World in South Korea. So here, right out of the station, we go for this launch into an enclosed room, which is essentially a top hat here. So it's a twisting top hat as you go up, and then it dives around. Now, excuse the quality of the POV. It is 14 years old now. We're weaving in and out of the castle itself, and then we have this little kind of a pause here, probably a block break of sorts, into this dive over top of the water, right skimming along the water. And then we're going to hit the brakes. Now we've got nice theming here. Low to the ground, low to the water, I should say. Bi-rail track. And then we'll engage the lift hill. So again, it's a really strange thing. Now, this actually isn't a lift hill per se. It's an LSM or a chain lift hill. It's an LSM lift hill. So right now, I'm guessing we're sitting waiting for a block to clear. Here we go. All right, so pretty quick, we are going to go ahead and use the thing, and there's their gyro swing popping up right there. Pretty cool positioning for that, I think. All right, the slow turnaround, and we have this great big drop back into the castle. Helix drop out here into the brakes. All right, so there are higher quality POVs elsewhere out there. If you want to see, I like to use Coaster Force just because I know those guys. So you can definitely get a higher, sharper quality image if you want. But let's go build one of these. We're going to use the Giga Coaster track just because it's the easiest thing to do. If you're going to build one of these in your park, then I would consider probably using all three of the mini coaster, the Giga Coaster, and the Impulse Coaster track. So you have your bi-rail, your tri-rail, and your quad rail. I think that's going to be a bit of a key thing kind of going forward. All right, so let's do a pretty low to the ground thing here to start. And what we're going to do, since this is a single car thing, and I'm guessing it does kind of a dual load, we're going to set this up like we would a Maverick style coaster, and we're going to put some blocks throughout. Double load station, so we'll have our load and our unload. let me think about this, kind of how I want to start this. I will also point you in the direction of a park. Let me find it here. So there's been a couple of people who have done aquatrax type coasters in the game. Here is a great one. There's a link in the chat from 5 Dave on New Elements. This is Man Falls, but he did a very nice job at one of these. Highly recommended. Okay, so first let's go back in here. Let's go ahead and change these to the water coaster trains. Because nobody's built one of these yet, so I'm using Space K's Mack water coaster. It's probably the best option that we've got to work with right now. All right, so we'll go ahead and kind of set this up. This. Okay, this will be a block break hold point. All right, we want our booster here. So the real thing goes only 50 miles an hour. It's pretty slow overall compared to what you might expect, especially for how fast the POV looks. In order to get this launch track kind of long enough, we're gonna extend this out just a little bit. Go with the 52 miles an hour here. It's a pretty short launch track. Up over 4 hour. Not quite where we want it to be. So let's see how high we get actually. Test this out. Rest it here, which I'd kind of like to be able to do. Not even close. Okay. Here's where our RCT scale gets a little bit screwy. So we're going to set this up with 72 miles an hour. A launch right here. I want to get this through 2 verticals here because I'm actually going to change this to different kind of track and then go vertical. So not quite. Again. All right, let's see how this does. Let's see what we're actually hitting here. We hit 56 on there, so we just need a longer launch is really what it comes down to. But the Giga Coaster does have a nice, strong launch overall. All right, start at 36. Let ourselves get built up to it. That should be good enough. Hope anyway. Let's change this real quick to Worcester Coast. We did say this had a top hat. So my hope is gonna do top hat like this, but let's see if we can get there. Got to go back to Giga Coaster because those are going to have different accelerations based on Twister versus Giga. Might need to really launch this thing faster. So all right, so we're at 62 miles per hour, and not bad actually. So we're getting a little bit closer. It's hard to say if I really want to go full vertical, but I feel like I am going to lose a lot of speed in there, so kind of am at this point. Let's just bang this thing up and run it the whole way at 90. There. I don't play with boosters terribly often, so this is one of those things that I'm not super comfortable with building just because it takes a little bit of fine-tune adjustment sometimes, and really it just needs to be a longer launch track is kind of what it comes down to. Okay. See what happens then when we do that. I don't want to go too much longer. That's true also. You're right, is that the shorter train is definitely not helping our cause. Have lift hill turned on for these, it looks like. Okay. The question is, does that actually make a difference? If I set the booster here to 134, am I really getting any further acceleration, or is the acceleration constant? And I don't know is the answer for my side. Let's just see what we get up to, because we hit a 60-some this last time. You might just have to continue with a shorter overall hill. Before, although I feel like I got a little bit of a good boost there. Let's do one more segment, and then we're actually going to rework how we do the first bit of this. Okay. Still don't quite think we're there, but let's see. Yeah, you're right actually. If it is, whether it's constant or whether it's not, I mean, you really don't see any need to avoid using it. 65. All right, we're gonna do something just a little bit different, which okay. Get to here. Perfect. All right. We're golden. Now, I would have much preferred to do that as a larger vertical piece of some kind, but since we're dealing with the speed issues, continue with it like that. Okay. So because of the way that our speed is, we want to be quick with this and make sure that we get what we need to do done. We can be on to the next element before we get too far along. I think that's going to be too much because you can see it's already there. This may be one of those rides that it's worth changing the mass on. $13 over that hill. Actually kind of fascinating how quickly we do have the mass on there. All right, well, what do you think I should change the mass to, Zara? Coaster 1. That is 005. Ride set mass 005 1000. Okay, let's see how that goes then. This is probably going to screw up our launch also. But we are going to learn together. Because I don't know. Okay, well that works. That's good. 37. Yeah, that's not good. So I guess we should set it a little bit higher still. Go 2500. what happens. Oop, oop, there it is. That's maybe a little much. Alright, right, set mass 005. Let's do 1500. Press fast forward. Okay. Okay, so somewhere in between, I think, is where we want to go. We'll go 1250 and see what happens. Then we can adjust. For adjustment. All right, that's still 80. Okay, 66. So we're getting better. We'll go 1100. If you've not done this before, and looking at these, you push the tilde key and 5. So fast, and you type in, first of all, rides list to pull up your rides list, and then you look at what your ID number is. So ours is Giga Coaster 1, so it's ride ID number 005. And then for mass, you type rides, set mass, make sure it's rides plural, 005, and then you type whatever mass you want. Now it varies between all the different rides, so that's a little bit of a challenge as far as all that goes for these, but something to consider kind of as you go through. Right. Give this one a try at 1050 and kind of see what we're doing. We might need to adjust down the launch speed. 6. Oh, did we lose all of our speed? Something revert back to what it was before? Sure looks like it did. I was happy with the 1100. That's interesting that it reset itself in some way or another. Oh, will it every time it respawns? See, that's interesting. Huh. Okay. Well, let's that becomes a challenge, doesn't it? Let's look at do that. So I'm gonna take ride set 005, 1100. Okay. Wait, let me do this in Notepad here real quick, and then I can just copy and paste it. Yeah, that is very true, as you could do a 2-car hack, but it's just going to screw up your station area. Okay. Let's see if this is good enough. Oh, that's still real fast. Yeah, that's a quick launch at that point. If I can get comfortable with the speed of the launch to the top hat, then we'll be pretty cool with everything else. 32 over top of that. I think I want to go just a little bit slower, to be honest. Like, say 1050. 2 over there. That's cool. Okay. Pull one more off of this. How we do. Okay. All right, so I think we're getting to where we want to be then. So now that we can do that a little bit differently, we will put this top head in, as I would say, properly, with a bit of a vertical element here. We'll make it just ever so slightly taller. We're going to pull out of it kind of early so then we can have this cool dive down. And this is the bit, if you remember from the POV, of kind of the castle, or hanging off the edge of the castle. We want to go diagonal here. Do just a little bit more so then we can get through that top hat. Go back to Giga 2. Go. Do a little bit of adjustment here, not too much. We'll continue that. Okay. That I think is going to be too high. Trying not to hit our invisible vertical track here. I kind of look at this as where our block break is going to be. We'll drop right outside for this portion. This whole thing gets a lot smaller. Kind of call this almost the indoor area if you're thinking about it as far as the themed ride goes from the real thing. And after that big drop, we had a little bit of a hop here. Then it was pretty low to the ground, actually. Skimming along the water, as it were. Okay. Not there, just okay. So we have kind of that whole bit there skims along, and then we have a lift hill after that with a drop that goes down across the water again and then back into the castle area. I think I'd almost say let's team. So your castle is sort of contained in these sections, perhaps. So this is a recreation of Atlantis Adventure at Lotte World. Um, so it's the only Intamin aquatrax in the world. We're working on now. So this will be a little brake run area. Hey, Linwood, how are you doing? Clear this block. Sort of a scenic portion here. And let's give ourselves a lift hill. Lift hill. Now the real thing has an LSM lift hill, so we're doing a chain lift here since we've already used the, or you need that for the incline. We don't have incline boosters as of yet. So you use the booster for the first launch rather than a chain, and then you can set this other one to whatever speed you want, which we're going to set to like 10 miles an hour because it was pretty quick. All right, let's see how high exactly we are. I don't want to be too big. I actually don't want to be too large at all. Cross, I like that. 1, 2, 3, 4. Trying to figure out where the best spot is to dive this one through. Wondering if better way. We can make the drop kind of squeeze through here. Kind of a neat option. We have that little bump in our launch. This is one of those things, if you're trying to make something work, kind of build backwards from it and see what fits. And right now we're finding out that it does not fit. Quite ideal. If it doesn't, it doesn't, and we can do something else. Ah, darn. Fine. Right now I'm just trying to think through how that drop gets positioned. So the real thing kind of does its lift hill over on the side somewhere and then kind of drops down right through the middle of everything. Why don't we do this actually? Let's put another piece here and then we'll finish this in a big themed element here. Brakes. Intamin, actually. This is a surprisingly old one that there's only one left. It's 2003. We've gone 17 years without having another, which means that we're probably going to go 17, or we're going to go forever now without having another one of these. Sort of a shame because it's a neat ride, or it looks neat. We want to skim the water. We're just in the way of this guy here. Right, worth though. Putting a little hill in here. Have it. Yeah, I kind of actually think that is that it might be kind of neat to do like a double drop. It just feels so weird doing it on a steel coaster like this because you expect that out of a wooden coaster, but not typically something from new manufacturer. Maybe that's it. Maybe it is a double drop with a flash of some sort here. This one will probably be extended. Yeah, it could. I mean, you kind of harken back to the older log flumes that really do that kind of a thing. All this our interior spot again, and then the whole thing after its drop has this. Yeah, this is the only aquatrax, or well, one we're basing it off of is the only aquatrax in the world. Not getting too much cooperation out of our section just yet. We said earlier we don't quite want to go through the section of vertical there, but we're gonna hit these. $45 and 40 right there, so we would need to go a little bit higher, but we can't. Put that in the way. Okay, well that works. That lets us get a good look though. This seems to be about the only thing that we can do. Make the most of it. We'll do that. Throw some airtime on boat. Little kicker hill there. Really, I'm just looking to wrap it around and then drop it into brakes that are probably going to go through the middle here. Said earlier, we're going to have the double station. I'm just kind of setting up for a lot of vehicles. Doesn't list how many vehicles are on the real thing, but I have to imagine it's quite a few. That's where we know we're going to end it. a lot of crossovers here. This may be one of those that I take after stream and see about redoing just a little bit because I'm not entirely happy with it. Not to say that we can't make it better. Indeed, always the goal. The clearances do not want to cooperate today for every reason. Thank God our next one's going to be easy. It was the hard one from the outset today. I don't think Mavericks is on the stream as of now. I know he's ridden this. It was very good. This is one of those that I'd definitely like to get to. Atlantis Adventure is one of those sort of bucket list coasters for a lot of people, I would say. Self included. Really trying to stick this outside again. I'm trying to keep within the overall footprint, but you know, that may not work. It may just be that we're kind of stuck with doing this kind of a thing. So be it, if that's the case. Okay, so we'll finish there, and then we'll just come down into the brakes and be done with it. I'm not gonna suddenly get happy with this layout, I don't think. Okay. So let's our continuous circuit mode up here. Let's start with 6 trains. And now that it's spawned, let's set our mass and kind of see where we land here. This top hat is pretty tall to begin with, so we're probably gonna... Oh, barely made it over. The 1050 speed. Probably a little bit too fast for everything else, but not fast enough for the top hat there. Now, with guests on it, it would probably push it over just a little bit, but never want to count on that for any reason. But okay, so it's a good. We're good on our block brakes so far. We've done the right thing. So let's see if we can get this one off that lift hill before he hits that brake. So we're feeling good about that. Now the question is the lift hill one going to get back before the next one is up on the lift hill? And I don't think it will. Close. Going to be close. Okay, we were like 2 blocks too short. So we're actually going to fix that because I want to get this right. We go through a block break right here. Which is fair to say. Okay. Things should operate without stacking. And that's always the goal when you build a coaster with block brakes and a lot of trains like this, is you want to build it so that it can ride without stacking. So it's just a matter of getting your block spacing and your track layouts good enough that you're not going to hit any of those points. We're doing this while we're waiting on this. Let's go ahead and Got to call out what we would see as the indoor portion of the ride. Right. That one back. I'll bring that one back. I kind of think that's how we would look at this. Some of this. Oh, we were still just a little bit off, but not too far. Okay with that. That's something that we could edit in. Or actually, you know, the best way to edit that simply to extend this. Okay, so as a kind of recap of what we're doing with this one, you've got your launch to begin with, you've got your lift hill. You could swap those if you wanted. I'm sure there's no reason why not. Got your low to the ground kind of water splash section here, and we don't necessarily catch up with that on the second part of this with the dive. So we'll call this all water. So ideally, and on the real thing, you know, this comes down, or the second drop comes down and touches the water there and kind of skims it. We're doing that kind of sort of down here at the end, but I think you want it back a little further. So really, it's just the placemaking of where I've set the layout is just not quite ideal. Yeah, it makes it even worse. Oops, that's fine. Let's put this back then. Really make a difference. Nice short little launch there too. I mean, you definitely get a lot of boost in a short amount of time, but that's what happens when you edit the mass on these things. So see how we're holding up. So not too bad. So let's see how many we have moving at one point. So our station is empty for a little while. You could probably say 7 trains on here, 7 to 8 trains, and still have it go without stacking. And that's remembering mid or full capacity going on here, that we're getting the coasters out, or the trains out every bit here. And just because we have such a long brake run, that's kind of why you can get away with that. You got kind of 2 in the brake run, 1 in the station, but not too bad. So we'll call that kind of what it is. And what it is kind of not quite ideal, but not awful. I think there's something to be said for it. We can do better, though, and we will later on. All right, so that was number 2. That one made up for all the time we saved on the first one by it going well. Okay, next up is one that you may not be familiar with. You're probably familiar with impulse coasters, but I don't know if you guys know that Intamin built a kind of topside one where the seats were wing coasters. So where they were back to back, hanging over the edge on either side. So this is the aptly named U-shaped roller coaster at Victory Kingdom. The sad part about it is that this ride is currently standing but not operating, and it operated for a very, very, very short amount of time, like an incredibly short amount of time. And I think is the park closed yet? The park is still operating, but the coasters have been closed for quite a while, which is a shame. because this one is definitely interesting, and I'm sure there's another park who would gladly take it off of their hands. I mean, RCT wise is pretty simple. Big thing is we don't have the train, so I think if you were doing no custom scenery, you'd be doing a multi-dimension coaster. If you're doing custom scenery, which we are, we're going to be doing the Parkitect Sky Rider custom train. So not too bad. The spikes tilt inwards just a little bit, so you can kind of see it here. They hang inwards there. There's really not too much to it. Now, you could, if you wanted to get clever with something like this, you could put a little airtime hill in on one side and do something like that. That's totally something that Intamin would do for things like this, as long as the comfortable with the track length being out there. But it's pretty straightforward. This is almost one of those throwaway ones here as far as layout goes, but just to show you that this is a thing that exists. Out of curiosity, let's see what happens when we put a topside vehicle on here. Where it lands. I think it'll sit well below. Fine. So it's kind of like level to it. All right. That's the track that we're going to use when we get to that point. But we want something that's got some vertical to it. Use the twister. Now the real thing has seats back to back on the cars, so that means there's only 4 cars in total, seating 4, 8, 12, 16, kind of, or 2, 4, 6, 8, kind of 2 on either side, back to back to make 4, to make 8 on both sides of the train. So it's a 32 person car, but we're just going to go ahead and say it'll be a 8 car long ride, since we don't have the ability to do that. Oh no, that's not a good choice. Now, why did we crash? That's the question. Did something change the mass? We miss one? So it looks like it would have crashed. Very interesting. Huh. Shouldn't be. I mean, these are locked to the track, I think. Maybe not. How many do we have? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and we did make 7, so good. Okay, so it crashed right here. That's a weird one. I don't know why it would have. Well, we'll leave it closed, and then maybe we'll investigate that in a little bit. Okay. Back to this. We are going to start with a bit of a boost. Then we're going to put a booster on each side here. I want just a little bit more. We're going to go with the weirdness here rather than the slope, just so that we can do the impulse coaster track. What we'll do is that. here with stuff. Let's make half height. Here. Gonna be glitchy. Very glitchy. What we can do instead is go with the Giga Coaster track. So that's fine because it is a little bit beefy rather than impulse track. So it's a little kind of a beefier tri-rail per se. And if you want to give it that little bit of extra kick, you can put the quarter loop at the top and then just like chop off a section. So you could do this and make the first bit invisible. That way you've got a little bit of a something. Now the ride itself is pretty big. It's 187 feet tall, so it's nearly 200 feet. But being that we're going to be playing here in RCT scale, we're going to not make it quite that big. So we can adjust the side. Okay. Call that what it is. Now we're going to do powered launch, passing station, and we're going to call this whatever we want. What we will do is we're going to give this a starting boost. It's not going to be very much, but it's going to be enough to kind of simulate that instantaneous start that a lot of these get. Then we'll let the launch track take over from there. We're probably going to crash this here in just a second because I've underestimated the amount of speed that we've got. Yeah. If we do indeed crash it, or if it sticks like that. Okay, that's actually full speed, so okay, let's call it 58 instead. Because it's a big train, it is going to carry a lot of that momentum. Now, granted, you could change the mass in the other direction and make it work that. All right, see how that goes. Not a terribly exciting coaster. I can't imagine you will be putting this in all of your parks coming up, but the idea, I think, is it's a substitute for an impulse coaster. If you want something obscure and interesting, this could be a good option. It would be cool to have the custom train that has the forwards and backwards cars. I don't really think there's a good reason for it to be built at this point, just because it's a pretty niche thing. Although it could be used for other things, like what we're gonna do next. Still, but actually, these are light blue support rail thing. Okay. And lastly, just kind of looking at the track here, it's actually, you go back to the database and just kind of look at this a little closer to figure out the track. It's the Intamin spine track, with kind of a bigger truss type back support to it. Roll through. You can kind of see it here. You got this really nice size, almost like a tri-rail truss with the Trax strapped to it, more or less. So that's the whole. This whole big tri-rail section is the backbone of the ride. So it's kind of consider it that way, and that's why they can get away with having so much height with no support at all. So it would be really nice to see this ride get bought and put somewhere else, but the fact remains it's been sitting here for as long as it has, that I really don't think we're ever going to see this operate again, which is really a shame considering it operated for only about a year and that's it. It is the only Intamin Fly Rider in existence. So unfortunately, that's how the coaster world goes sometimes. Okay, so next up, we're going to jump over to another one of the Intamin wing coaster varieties. So, back into clear out last one. All right, so next up is what we're just calling the Intamin Wing Rider. Now, it's similar to, say, what Skyrush has and what Flying Aces has at Ferrari World Abu Dhabi. But this one is a fully out over the edges track where it's essentially what, I mean, it was the first wing coaster, so fully out over the edge of the track. Kind of a blank middle rather than the other ones like Skyrush where it's two on top of the track and then two off the side. So this is well and truly the only of the Intamin Fleet Circuit wing coasters like this. So this is Furious Baco. Like I said in the opening, we've already built one of these in the launch coaster stream way back when. I think it was launch coasters, but it's a pretty big ride, and the thing is that the layout itself doesn't actually do a whole heck of a lot. It's we go back and take a look at the map here, because this will give you a good idea of the actual layout. It does very little. So here's our station, which actually includes a show building, and then it launches out to here's our launch track to a or launch building, a pretty fast launch actually. So it is a hydraulic launch, and it hits at 84 miles an hour essentially, which is really fast actually. So one of the fastest coasters in Europe as it stands. So it drops a little bit after the launch into this long kind of low corner. There's this sort of weird unthemed tunnel thing, like a concrete kind of bunker. So then it wraps its way over, hops the launch track here, has a really long roll. So the roll starts here in the turn and actually completes itself out here. So it's a really long curve across the whole thing before it has one more nice dive right along the water and then comes back up into the brakes. So it's basically a figure eight, just this one little thing. A little bit of a shame that it's only that, but it is kind of a relentless speed ride. So let's jump back. We'll do something, perhaps. We'll go ahead and use the Giga Coaster. So the real thing has a larger track gauge than this one, than the Giga Coaster here, but that said, there's not a whole lot we can do about that. Let's start up high. Well, high-ish, I suppose. We're going to use the Parkitect Skyrider trains again. Only 6-car trains on this one. And I think you probably want to go anywhere between 5 to, you could maybe get away with 7, but from what I understand, this ride is pretty darn rough, actually. So maybe not the one that you want a long train on. Okay, that'll be our block break. Jump into the booster here right off the bat. A decent long launch. Now it is hydraulic launch, which can get you a quicker acceleration from a standing start than the LSMs can. Let's consider where we are. Well, at our little pre-show room there at what we get up to 72. Kind of right at the end too, which is not too bad. All right. So rather than dropping immediately, what I want to do is kind of go up and give it a little bit of a hill before we get on. And now the problem is when you get going this fast in this game, it ends up looking a little bit silly over top of some of the elements. So we gotta take that with a little bit of a grain of salt with how fast you're going. Make these super wide corners. Because really this whole thing was about cornering. And this might be one of those where you do adjust the mast a little bit to make it a little bit slower overall. Lose some speed more quickly. Notice we're still going 72 through that corner, and it's not going to be a very long ride. But it's not to say you can't have larger hills if you want to have larger hills. No, nothing prohibitive against that. You easily just skirt the top here, which I kind of almost want to do just because gives it a little bit of a place to lose some of that speed. Back up. Like I said, there's not a whole lot going on with these rides. Well, I should say these rides, but this ride. So you only have one thing to go off of, and it kind of ends up being the cheetah hunt syndrome, where everybody building that kind of a ride does that exact same sort of tower for the beginning of it, and then does something different for the rest. So we're building ours, in a same sort of similar manner to it, where it's low to the ground, airtime hills, things like that. But not to say you couldn't get in there and do some pretty cool, larger stuff too. What I am going to do is kind of bank that really early. Curve this. Do another little flyby here of some sort. 40 feet. A little bit lower. I'm trying to pay a little bit of attention to how the different heights are. So like this first one is 40, this one's 45, this one's 40, this one's 35. I just want to make it a little bit different, just so it doesn't look too samey across the board. I want to think about that just a little bit here. What are we doing by the time we get to here? Still 60, so we've only lost about 11 miles an hour in that whole set, which isn't too bad. What we are going to do now is the roll. That is the one inversion that this thing did. Now, there's really no reason why these couldn't do the inversions that that the others do, like the B&Ms. They are a little more rigid. If you look at the... Let's go back real quick and look at the train shot of it. Oh, here we go. So you look at the train here, and you can see that you have your chassis and everything, and your frame and all that. And then this is literally just one big bar that goes across the whole thing, kind of angles down on either side. And that's pretty much it. So we contrast that to the B&M. Good shot of the B&M, which kind of hangs up, over, and then down. And what you also miss on there is there's a little bit of a dampening piston through the entire thing, so that this has some ability to bounce without being totally jarring. And from what I understand, based on reviews of Furious Baco, that's one of the big issues for that ride, is that it has this rigid frame and it doesn't really give, so you feel every one of those bumps. Kind of an interesting overall thing. And this is back when they were doing the real big chunky over the shoulder harnesses, over the shoulder lap bar things, but not a huge fan of. All right, back to Giga Coaster. It's funny seeing that you can see the difference right here between Giga Coaster launches and the B&M track launches is we're crawling through this layout. They're gonna make it. Oh, good catch. That's the first time today. Not too bad. Not too bad. Okay. Little flat dive here. And this simulates that last corner on the real thing. And make sure you scale down your brakes as you come in here. Don't just drop them all at 18 or something like that. Which way did I roll this? You know what we actually want to do, probably more so than a barrel roll, is we probably want to go with the inline twist. The ride itself has no heart line based, well, it has a heart line, but it's not where the riders are. Let's think about this too a little bit. So we are rolling in, and then we're going to pop out and then immediately go back the other way. I want to start with a left, start with a right, roll to the left, and then roll back in. So it's going to be sort of a continuous roll coming out of it into this curve, which ideally we'd just be able to do, but can't. Okay. Once again, back to Giga. Here and build our section here. Dark blue, white. Give this a station. Two trains. Have it. Waiting to depart station. 5 blocks do we have? Only 2 blocks. That's why. You can only have as many trains as one less of your maximum amount of blocks. So if you only have 2 blocks, you can have only 1 train. Okay, so we'll call this our show scene here, and we actually made it a little longer than might be otherwise, solely for the purpose of it taking a little while to get there. This ride can be a little further along before the thing parks. Ideally, we would set this, or if we were running this in our park, we would set this timer way higher up, so that this would be sitting here only for a second before it takes off. Obviously, the roll is crazy fast in the game. Based on kind of the length of the real one, this should be about 3 times as long, so it looks a little stupid as it rolls through there, especially with the trains as wide as they are. So, right through the middle there, a little bit fast, but you can see what we were thinking about as far as the roll through the roll, I suppose, is that it rolls to the right, comes back up, and then immediately comes down around the corner, so it kind of flows back through, and it doesn't roll through and then bank back in the direction it was just going. So not too bad overall. One thing to consider theming-wise as you do these or 4D coasters or any of the other wing-type coasters is that although the game recognizes this as a single-tile ride, they are not single tiles. They're really kind of 1.5 to 3. So if we pause this right here, pull up the landscape, you can see that it's still showing all the seats, but there's no way that the train is fitting through there. So when we talk about theming and things like that, you really want to give it potentially 3 throughout, or if you've got your quarter tiles going on, you can give it 1 or 2 with half from either side plus the middle, and then it's going to fit a little bit closer. So just think about that, especially with your station. The big thing that you see with the station here as we let this thing go is this thing clashes all to hell with the sides of the station. So make that station invisible, put back a regular track underneath of it, just going the opposite direction for your kind of dummy visual track, and then theme the station yourself so it doesn't cut through and look a mess. Okay. That was number 4, and I realize we haven't done that with the others, so let's go through and look at 3 and 2. Okay. Let's see what our time is. An hour 40, not too bad. Okay, so next up, we are going to look at the Mack E-Motion Coaster. This is maybe a bit of an odd one that you might not be familiar with, and I wouldn't really blame you because it didn't make a big splash, I would say. There are technically 2 of these, but the second one is almost not a coaster because there's so little of it. Let's actually look at that one first, just because it's worth showing. So, Amsterdam Dungeon, which is one of the Merlin attractions, there's a number of the dungeons around in European cities, and actually I think some of the US cities too, but had a little coaster here that had an elevator lift, a drop track section, and like 1 corner. It was about one of the smallest tracks you could see built in this like old church, just kind of plopped in the center. Didn't really do a whole heck of a lot, and it's actually gone now. This was pulled out in 2014. Supposedly it was meant to go somewhere else, but I don't think it has. But regardless, Tuulareki in Lindenmäki, Finland, is the other one. This is kind of the one of a kind that I'm calling it. It's a small little ride. It kind of is a filler, kind of family ride. It almost reminds you of a Gerstlauer bobsled coaster, with the flat corners on top and then some of the diving corners on the bottom. Actually, this wouldn't be a bad guess the coaster image, I think, because a lot of people might mistake this as a Gerstlauer bobsled coaster. And you can see this is about it for the track. Now, what supposedly made this kind of ride different from others is that it's it's got special springs in the chassis that let the ride kind of flex back and forth a little bit. So kind of sway side to side, I suppose. It doesn't really show in the POV, and I don't know enough people who have ridden this to be able to tell me if you can actually feel it or not. So we're gonna have to take their word for it. Let's take a watch of the POV here and see what this looks like. So once again, Coaster Force POV. So thank you to them. All right. Ulareki. Little tiny transfer track right there. Little baby transfer track. See all the cool exposed rock, which is something Linden has to deal with. This is a super cool park. It's one that I'd really like to get to. For Taiga, their Intamin launch coaster that they just recently put in, which looks incredible. But they've got a number of other cool coasters. So we start out with these flat corners here, where supposedly you lean out a little bit in the corners. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. Hard to say. But we're already going to hit our first block break here. Since these are only 6-car train or individual cars, not a whole lot to it. So we're going to dive off of that up and into this kind of curving climb. Back down. Around and into the brakes. One more. One more here. Dive down. Up. Around and in. That's it. So it's a pretty short ride. It doesn't do a whole heck of a lot, and there's not much to it. But interesting enough, I suppose. Interesting enough that Lynn and Maki bought one. So I don't expect you're going to see another one of these ever. But here we are. Let's build one. I think the best course of action on this is to use the mini coaster track. We can supplement with the Giga Coaster and a couple of the higher stress locations. And then I'm also using the Premier Skyrocket train. Now it does have, the real thing does have lap bars. So the Skyrocket train is maybe a little bit too tall for it, and also has the comfort collar over the shoulder bits. But it's probably the closest we have to the real thing, or at least to the actual ride. Go back in and turn off our building at invalid heights. And again, because we have the short train, we're going to do the custom load unload station, as is that. We're also going to give it 2 spots here, so then we can do a transfer track right there if we want to go that route. It's a pretty short lift hill. Don't want to do too much. I'm going to get started kind of right off the bat with these flat corners. So the question ends up becoming, do you do them like a wild mouse corner, or do you do them like a or do you do them, you know, with the wild mouse tight corners, or do you do them with the larger corners? I think my argument is for the larger. Let's this. We want to keep this compact. There's really no reason why it wouldn't be compact. Give ourselves a block break right here. This is probably going to be another one of those mass adjusted tracks, perhaps. And I would say, as you're looking to build this, you kind of do it in the same way that you would a Gerstlauer bobsled coaster, so I don't think there's too much difference among the two different types. That pull there may be unnecessary for the block break, but don't have a whole lot going on for the actual element itself, or the ride layout. There's just not a whole lot to this ride. I would certainly like to see, because I'm sure that Mack had custom layouts of these, or stock layouts that they showed to clients. I'd be really curious to see what some of those looked like, just to kind of see what they planned them to be, because it doesn't, it looks like it could have been something successful with a little bit of adjustment, but wasn't. Actually, that can probably finish it. As kind of boring as that is. But I think that's, I would say this is going to be an accurate representation of what this ride does. All this block, that a block. Didn't say they were all exciting. Pretty simple one. Our Premier Skyrocket 2. World's tightest seat. Put 4 of these on here and see what that looks like. Before we do that, delete those, and then we're going to rebuild the station with this one first, this one second. Should mean, there you go. So you want your, whenever you're doing multiple stations, you want your first station kind of in line, closest to the lift hill, to be the one that's got station 1 designation, because that means you're going to start your train there. Okay. Let's see if any of these blocks are necessary. I would guess at least one will be. Okay, so both necessary. And actually, that operates pretty well block-wise. Red cut. There's not a whole lot to it, is kind of the short of it. It's not a terribly long ride. I think the best that can be said for it is that it's pretty similar to a Gerstlauer bobsled coaster, and I think if you built one that was a little bit longer, you could probably do more of that. It doesn't quite seem to have the tight directional changes that one can. Although I guess there's really no reason why I couldn't. The chassis doesn't look terribly much bigger, so it probably could make some of those tighter corners. Okay, so that is number 5. Okay. A lot of blue coasters today if we're following the real thing. Okay. Ducks. 15 ducks. Is there space? Oh, we don't have space for them. Hold on. Let me make the ducks a pond. There we go. Your duck pond. Okay, so now we are at the. It's acceptable. It's a nice square pond. I'll even put a. Look at that theming. Fanciest damn duck pond in the world. So the last one was a Mack emotion coaster. It's basically a coaster that has some tilting to it for the corners, supposedly. I can't tell on the POV, and I haven't really read enough reviews of the ride to know if it really feels like it or not. I'm going to hazard a guess not, only because there's only one of them in existence. So probably didn't quite pass the mustard as far as interest goes for other parks, or at least interesting enough to buy the thing. It could be that the price point was too high. I mean, who knows? There's a lot of factors that go into that. But okay, we are at our typical break time. We are back. Taco Bell, huh? Although I don't know, according to some of the states' COVID numbers, I'm sure there's a lot of Taco Bell nacho party packs going on. House down the street from us that's got about 20 cars sitting at it right now, and I'm keeping my distance because that is not a smart idea. So anyway, we are back with the coaster, one-of-a-kind coasters. So we called it one-hit wonders. So we have 4 more today. These aren't by any means kind of the 9 best of this topic or anything. I just picked these because they were interesting, and also because we hadn't done some of them. Now granted, the Intamin Wing Rider was an exception, but that's not to say that they're not worth doing again. But I like to do some new things, and 12 streams in plus 3 special edition streams, we're kind of running out of brand new stuff to do, and it gets a little more specific. So I thought this would be a time to highlight some of the more individualized coasters out there. So like I said, we've got 4 more here. The first one is going to be the Zierer Tower Speed Coaster. The second one is going to be the Vekoma Wild Mouse. The third one is going to be the Skytrak Flying Coaster. And the fourth one is going to be the Maurer Looping Coaster. So let's jump back to our RCDB page. We're going to get rid of Tulareki and get to Wicked. So Wicked is a Zierer Tower coaster. There are 2 Zierer Tower coasters. There is one with a launch and one with a lift hill. The lift hill version is at Knoebels Grove. That's called Impulse, and that came second. This was the original coaster. This was remains the only Zierer Tower launch coaster. So the tower bit is right here. This is a cool vertical tower with a pretty tight climb over the top and then a dive down on the other side. What's pretty interesting about this one too is that that's a neat picture with the snow. This not only has a launch in the tunnel here, it's got a launch on the vertical section. So you can see here the LSM fins going vertically up. As far as I know, this is the only coaster in the world that has a vertical launch. So it's already moving pretty good at the base, but also climbs up a vertical launch here. I don't have a webcam, but today I'm wearing my Lagoon shirt. Lagoon, I actually just got back from Lagoon in September. One of the few parks I got to do this year. Beautiful park. Highly, highly recommended, but this ride was closed. So I got spited on this one. So sadly, I can just look at it and tell you that it looks nice, but I can't give you a ride review just yet. One day I'll go back, take a look. But before we do, let's take our virtual ride. While we do it, let's find our Ghost Force POV. How do we get today? Pushing the Star Wars pretty heavily, isn't it? That's EA, so that's always suspicious. Okay. Let's take a look. Now, Lagoon does a lot of work in-house. Their newest coaster, Cannibal, is pretty spectacular. It was an in-house project, and it has an elevator lift hill, a super steep beyond vertical drop, some incredible airtime inversions and everything like that. That's a pretty cool one-off coaster that we could talk about also, but I think we'll save that for another day. Um, this one was sort of their one of their early forays into it. They did do a lot of this ride in house also. The Zierer obviously was the main manufacturer for it. Um, but double loading, as you can see, this is only single trains, kind of 2 rows, 8 people in total. So we will do another one of these entrance and exit stations because that probably makes the most sense. All right, so here we go into our launch track. Ends here and then it picks up again. So we launch up and over that top hill right there, which is super cool. Over an airtime hill there, a couple of mag brakes, an overbank corner. The 0G roll here is the one and only inversion on the ride. We come up and over the station. Pretty cool supports that hold this bit up. Then we come through the block break and have this overbank, well not overbank, but just high banked slalom turn, and then we have these kind of couple of little lower turns here. In my opinion, the ride kind of looks like it dies a little bit towards the end, but you know, it's not too bad, I would say, and it's a pretty interesting layout for a first try. I'm sure Zierer had hoped to sell more of these, but being that it is now how many years past? This is a 2007 attraction, so 13 years later, I'm not feeling like we're going to see too many more of these. Those Mormons are wild, you know it. Okay, so let us get a mini coaster. Actually, let's do Giga Coaster. Well, we'll do mini coaster, I think. If we do boosters with it, we can. We'll keep the start pretty low to the ground here. Maybe 2. Maybe 2. Like we said before, we want the front station to be station 1. So the trains on this one are another... Oh. Man, 0 for 2. That's not good. I had gone a while without having those kind of screw-ups, but here we are. Oops. Wagon coaster, tower speed coaster. Alright, so Spacegate did make a version of this. This is the Tower Speed Coaster. Now there's a weird kind of glitch with this thing. If you go down to 1 car, it actually has 3 cars. So what you have to do is go into the cheats and disable vehicle limits. And then change it around, and that's how you get to your 2 cars per train. So it's actually is a 0 car per train set up here. Get to that next this once more. Okay. Perfect. We're going to hit our booster track right away. Well, that actually takes off really fast. Wow. Let's slow that down. It's not a long shot here, but then what we're going to do is change this right over to the twister coaster. Get ourselves vertical. Put a chain lift on this vertical. That chain lift up to a 20 miles per hour. And we're going to shift over to the vertical drop coaster. Probably want to back this off just a little bit here. A little smaller. 115. Then we'll give this just a chain lift boost. Yeah, we'll see how that goes. I think we're gonna be lucky if we see one. Though that said, Luna Park surprised me by buying one of their single rail. So who knows? We might get a little bit lucky with it, and somebody will buy one. But I'll be a little suspicious to actually go through with it. Okay, go back to our mini coaster. So let's see how we're doing up and over this thing. We're going to need to make some adjustments to it. I'm going to fly over the top, I'm guessing. No, not at all, actually. Need to keep it till it hits that chain lift. Only challenge is when your ride breaks down, you could potentially get a coaster stuck on that lift hill, so just be aware. Okay, that wasn't too bad. Let's take a look once more at that speed. Alright, so we're going to get up to 54, drop down to 25. So that's not too bad. Let's see what we do over top. I wasn't paying that part. Said that it was holding 25 the whole way, which makes me think that maybe the chain lift was turned on. That's just wondering if this has had a chain lift on it, so we'll back that up. Try that again. It won't surprise me when somebody ends up doing an upside down launch. I mean, airtime hill launches are all the rage right now, so it won't be surprising, I don't think. But ooh, work. 35. My biggest thing is that I think it's going to be a maintenance nightmare, just being able to get to the thing, to work with it, to adjust it. That's going to be a challenge. I'm also not convinced it's going to be the most comfortable either. Okay. So we have our up here. So what I'm first going to do is go in here just to make sure that we know where everything is. These in. Or am I? Oh, I was right the first time. Because I found, going back to that maintenance thing, I found as I've spent more time in the industry that it's not necessarily what the initial ride can do, whether it's a success or not. I mean, in some cases it is, but it's really how the ride performs overall. I mean, is it a is it a maintenance nightmare? Is it really hard to work with? What is the deal? Ooh, ugly as possible. Why not do lime track? Because if the thing is a pain to maintain, nobody's gonna like that budget. Nobody's gonna like how that all looks in the end. So you really kind of want to avoid how any of that comes together. You need one more. Well, and that's the thing is you buy an Intamin not because you're looking for the most reliable thing in the world, unless you're buying one of their like family type coasters or something kind of tried and true. You buy an Intamin because you're looking to push the bounds, and if you are into that and that's what you're looking for your park, then that's a good purchase. What you need to be aware of though is what you're getting into. Um, you buy a B&M because you want something that's going to be a great crowd pleaser, that's going to definitely create a lot of buzz, but is also going to be um, very stable and hold up for you in the long run. So I think that, I mean, that's the biggest difference. And I mean, parks know full well what they're getting into in a lot of cases, or if they don't, that means they didn't do their research. So I think it's one of those where if a park is whining about it that it's unreliable, I kind of get it. You expect prototypes to be unreliable as part of it, but from what I understand, the lagoon is still having challenges with this one. I mean, it was down for a full 3 days while I was there, so that's a disappointment for me. But I'm sure just as much of a disappointment for the park's maintenance team. All right, so we got some pretty fast bits here. We'll see how fast some of this loses speed. I mean, their more conventional layouts are probably going to be pretty all right. It's just a matter of what does the how the trains and control systems and everything kind of act for the rest of the ride. So I could easily see those being all right. And true enough, you don't hear too much about those being issues. Um, that you the same in the same way that you do um, Top Thrill Dragster or something like that. Let's try and get the roll in here at some point. I want to do that before we run out of space. I kind of want it to be a traditional 0G roll, which means you're going to enter and exit straight with a fair bit of entry and exit to it. And just make this big portion here. Let's see how we're doing. That feels like it'll work for a roll. Poster. And this one we are going to use a 0G roll. Now, you might have noticed when I pointed it out on the real one is that it does have trim brakes on it. So if you find yourself moving too quickly and you really want to slow it down, it's not out of the question to say that that's all right. That looks pretty good as far as speed goes for this overall thing. Certainly, the question is, do you feel launches are becoming less special because you're seeing them more often? I think to some extent, yes. Mostly because once they're more ubiquitous, it's definitely less unique compared to other ones out there. For those first launches were super interesting, and now you're not really getting that same sort of thing. But that's not to say that there's not interesting things going on with rides. I think right now you're seeing the growth of launches that have an airtime hill in them and things, other kind of different things to create kind of a point of difference. So I think that's really where it's going to see a little layout of cannon. Probably so. It's a cool layout. It's definitely small. I mean, it's going up right now in Iowa, so the park did buy it and refresh it, and it's looks good in its bright green paint scheme. But I would not be surprised if it was a maintenance issue. I think that's part of the reason why you don't see any of the hydraulic launch coasters from Intamin any longer, is they cost a lot to run and it's a big power draw, and it's just overall pretty expensive for those things. LSM in general is a little bit cheaper, so it's not totally surprising that we see that as an option now. And the thing is that I love a good hydraulic launch coaster, and I probably prefer them to LSM launches. But I can kind of totally understand why parks would say, I think I'd rather have a something like a an LSM coaster or like a Maverick or something like that, where it's the LSMs are a little easier to control. I mean, it's definitely an improvement over limbs. Um, limbs were really big power draw back in the day. How do we want to continue this? Kind of thinking I'd like a corkscrew in here. A little bit of a pause there at the top, but too bad. Don't believe I'm very close to being aligned. Need one more. That is a little slow through there, so maybe instead of the launch, we just do curves. A little less interesting. I would love to see another one of these. I would be curious to see what would happen. And it always makes me wonder too, how many parks went through and got proposals for these kind of rides and all of that. sort of stuff. I mean, there's so many coasters out there that have proposals that parks have put or companies have put together, but then just never see the light of day. Fortunately, that's just part of the process. I do want the green rails. It's not quite obnoxious enough with the gray rails. Maybe just the, yeah, that's good. Too. Some parks publish their stuff, or it kind of leaks out what parks were meant to get at different times. Um, Alton Towers is pretty famous for having a lot of ride concepts that just kind of never happened. And other ones no. I mean, like for example, a lot of parks when they do a new coaster, they'll get proposals from 5 or 6 different manufacturers who give them different layouts or different options, and then they choose from that which ones they want to do. So it's always a bit of a disappointing thing then, because you see a bunch of cool, interesting layouts that just never see the light of day. Let's give this a 4-car train. See what we have. I'll have to see if I can dig up any of those and post them, so you can kind of see what was out there. Okay. Second half a little bit slow, but really not any different than the real thing. What I wonder if maybe it would be better to do is to set a block down here. Just need to see how the train holds on there, because what we don't want is for it to hold largely on the corner, because you never want to start a launch where half the train is hanging around the corner, because you're going to get a lot of weird lateral forces on your riders. So something to consider when you're building launches, if you have a hold brake beforehand, is that the train isn't sitting on a hill or sitting on a corner or something like that before they get to that point. The other question, though, is, and I just realized that this might be an issue, is that I don't think this one's going to get back before that one gets to the block brake. So that might be why we don't have a block there. Ooh, just in time. Okay, that's all right. I was going to say if we couldn't do it there, we could maybe do it on the one straight section on the side. Not bad. Okay. So that is our Zierer Tower Speed Coaster. Okay, so next up is the Vekoma Wild Mouse. So there's actually a whole lot of different unique wild mice coasters, and I got to the point where I was putting this stream together that I could nearly do an entire stream of just wild mouse coasters, but I think that would end up being a little bit boring. So we'll continue to squeeze them into other streams here and there just to go through some of the list. Togo Looping Mouse was definitely one of those that was pretty high on my list of ones to showcase, but there's more than one of those, so not today. But there's only one of these. This is the Vekoma Wild Mouse Coaster. So this is at Idlewild in Pennsylvania. It actually started at Prater Park in Austria and went to Alton Towers as the Alton Mouse, and now is here in Idlewild. Idlewild is a very small park, kind of nearest to Pittsburgh, south of Kennywood. And what's striking about this mouse is a couple of different things. First of all, it's really big. Like, it's easily probably the biggest wild mouse I think I've seen. And it's got some unique stuff. The lift hill is crooked. So let's get on board. This is David J. Ellis's POV. Take a look at this. Ryan Reynolds. Okay. So he's got a lot of really great POVs. This is one of the older ones, I'm guessing. So we're starting just off the lift hill here. So the lift hill is tilted. It's banked. We'll look at a better picture of it in a little bit. But you can kind of see what's going on here. So we're starting out with the traditional, typical wild mouse style turns. A number of them here. But then we'll get into some of these larger drops. There's actually a pretty substantial drop here into kind of a wider banked corner. Another substantial drop. There's a lot of trees around this, which is pretty interesting. Then we get to another set of switchbacks here. Yeah, that tree, I don't remember that tree being as close as it was, so perhaps it's not anymore. And then we get to some of these little kind of airtime hills kind of throughout. Around the layout. It's been at Idlewild for a number of years now, so it wouldn't surprise me if there's the ability for it to have grown a fair bit of trees. Some banked corners, which is sort of unique for a wild mouse. A couple airtime hills, and then it's going to end early, unfortunately. So, out of curiosity, let's see. I'll see if anybody else has one. All right, well, let's take a look at Kennywood Joe and see what we've got here. Go the whole way through. Here's where we picked up before. So a couple airtime hills. Another banked corner here. Airtime hill or two, and then some breaks on there. The braking is very aggressive. It is like super aggressive. So definitely a one to hold on as far as that's concerned. Here we see it at Alton Towers. You can kind of see how more substantial the thing is. Small little picture there, but here's a better shot. But it's a big boy. I mean, as far as wild mice go, this is a sizable coaster. So let's build one. Not done one of these before, so I think it'll be interesting to see how it comes together. All right. So the question is, how do we want to go about this? And I kind of want to use the limb coaster or the looping coaster track because it's got the proper pipe spine on it. It doesn't quite fit for the switchbacks, so we're gonna have to figure out how we want to do that. Open to suggestions. So let's start with this lift hill because it's odd and unique. It is banked the side and is very awkward. You kind of go up the lift hill just sort of on an angle, and it definitely kind of really reinforces the weirdness of the ride. Makes it very interesting. So first things first, we're going to get off of this lift hill, and we will probably say that. I'm going to use the steel Wild Mouse cars. I'm going to use these cars, which are more of the Arrow Wild Mouse cars, but that's okay. I'm back to launch the lift hill. That sounds unpleasant. What I just realized is that this screen isn't going to have the sprites for this anyway. Yeah, as far as I'm aware, it is the only lift hill that's banked, you know, besides like the Big Thunder Mountain ones. I wonder, maybe we just go with the El Loco cars. That way we can at least get the banking shown on here. There we go. And it's not like it's banked this far. I mean, in RCT it looks a little silly, but it is, you know, it's not insubstantial. Okay. Now let's do our Steel Wild Mouth. Start with something like this. And we'll put a little bit of banking in there. I found pretty bizarre, just I mean the whole thing odd, but we're be slow by the time we get up to here, so we'll go back to okay. Where is my Steel Wild Mouse? I think it doesn't really seem to have diving drops, curved drops, because I was thinking for a minute that it might be fun to do this sort of a thing with it, but I'm not seeing that on the real thing. Real supports are just We'll just go ahead and say having corners like this. And kind of nest this in there, which is always a good decision when you can do it. Go flat through there. What you need to do is figure out how to get back. I kind of think maybe we just go or possible to get under this one. Uh, Five. We're gonna get under there. Ideally, I'd be a little further over, but you know what? This is okay. We'll put this. Then back into a mouse. Turn. More little hills, and now we can be back into the brakes. Part of those brakes is we're gonna have another double station. I didn't necessarily intend this to be double station day, but I guess it just makes sense that that's what a lot of these do. Yeah, this is a chonky boy. I want to replace this last hill with brakes. Was lock here, brakes here, lock here, brakes here, lock, and 2 more brakes. Okay, exit, entrance, put them both on that side. Go back to looping coaster. Put a block brake here. I wonder what the limb would look like if we can get rid of those. Two different ones there. Oh, one wants to be here, even though I want to drop the other way. Let's change that real quick. So you want to drop pretty quickly after you put in your block brake, just to ensure that things keep moving. Right at the end here. Through this whole thing, we'll put one on the here. Okay. Start with 6 trains. See how that goes. Oh. I was wondering why we were launching the thing out. Alright. Miles per hour. Let's see how it looks, and then I can put in the overall. I cannot wait for speed controllable block brakes. That's going to be a wondrous day when we can actually control the speed of our blocks. The ride's been retrofitted over the years, and it now runs with magnetic brakes, which is a little bit sad because I feel like the real thing is, or the original thing must have been pretty insane. Um, but for the most part, it ran pretty well. It was still pretty aggressive on a few of those hills. Really slow going through some of these bits. We'll put that lift hill up a little bit so we can maybe increase the speed through here. Go back to looping real quick to adjust that. I think it's probably worth unbanking the one right here based on speed. Probably not necessary at that point. But we are stacking though, that's not good. Stacking pretty substantially too. Which we weren't with the 4 mile per hour lift hill. Back to that. And let's close it. Bank corner. This one wants to move to this side. Because really, when you think about it, we wouldn't be having these little dips throughout. Just the whole thing would be at a slant, a slightly slanted angle. So it's not something you could generally do. You go back to this. All right, there we go. All right, now I'll drop in all of the corners. I'm essentially just building the whole ride backwards. It's a unique ride, and I'm happy to see that it's still running because it's one of those that I could have very easily expected to not ever see it, or to see it having kind of closed a while ago. But it's nice to see. I don't necessarily think that Idlewild is out there like intentionally aiming to preserve a piece of history. I think it's just a coaster that they happen to have, which is maybe a little bit sad, but I hope that they will look after it a little more nicely here for the future. It was certainly popular when we were there. They also weren't running it very well at all. It was one of those things where it was like one train was sent, or one vehicle was sent out at a time, and that was pretty much it. And you were kind of sitting around waiting for the rest of the thing. And if you noticed on the POV, the whole thing is on a space frame, so it can travel, and it certainly did. Which is kind of almost more incredible to me that you had this gigantic house, as it were, that did its traveling. Right. So there you have it. There is our 7th coaster of the day, the Vekoma Wild Mouse. Be a little too narrow compared to the real thing, perhaps, but not bad. All right, number 8. This is going to be kind of an interesting one because I don't think a lot of people are going to know about it. This is Skytrak. So this This ride was the world's first flying coaster. So it was not stealth. It was not air. It was not any of the other ones. So this was a single rail flying type coaster that opened in the UK in 1997 and closed kind of the next year with a lot of trouble. This is at a place called Granada Studios. It was a film studio um, in Manchester. So it's a pretty large ride, as you can see. It kind of looks similar to some of the Premier and Set Point suspended water coasters, but it actually has some kind of dynamic cornering and some things like that. Yeah, it's a shame. I would have liked to have seen it. So here's the vehicle, which is not a great picture of it, but it reminds me of the Zamperla Valair, which is probably not a good thing. But it looks like you kind of climbed up into it and then it folded up and latched. Then you went around. You can kind of see this guy coming into the brakes here. Pretty cool. It seems that it was a custom deal, a custom ride. And I don't believe there's a POV of this. Let me check real quick. You guys are back here and see if I've never seen a POV of this. So there is a video by Lad Venture on YouTube that looks like it's got some videos and some other things or some clips of things in there. Anybody, but so not too much on it. I'm sure there's some different things you can find out there. I don't necessarily want to put it on the video because then they'll get it taken down for copyright and all that. So you can definitely look at this one potentially and find some options perhaps. But so anyway, it's a pretty decent sized ride for a prototype and one that's done essentially by a one-off company. So it's a subsidiary of an engineering firm, which is interesting. I suppose it's no different than, say, Maurer. They're largely a bridge company, or PAX, who's a space company. I mean, PAX Rides makes coasters, Ferris wheels, and spaceships. So, stranger things out there, I suppose. But 1,200 feet is pretty long, 50 miles an hour, or 50 feet tall and 28 miles an hour. That's reasonable for the whole thing. So, what we're going to do, I think, is go back to the here. Right. So the way that I'm going to build this is as a single rail suspended coaster, but we're going to use the or the single rail steeplechase coaster, but then we're going to use the single rail flying coaster for the actual element. So build up knowing that it's going to be down below for the ride. Again, low capacity. We're going to do our double station. Two. Okay. So it kind of looks like right out of the bat, or right out of the gate, we have a lift hill. And I think I'm planning to do only one lift hill at this point. Now, the disappointing thing with the steeplechase is that you don't have banking on it. We can't do diving corners, and we can't do some of the other kind of fun stuff that it looks like the real thing has, which is a little bit sad. But we'll stick with this for now. So let's follow this. So I wanted to, if you set it up like this, the ride usually has sort of a stick that it hangs down from. If you set it up like this, it puts the vehicle closer to the track, which I think looks maybe a little bit more accurate. So that's why I'm sticking with it in that form. It doesn't look like the ride had very many large drops on it, but it definitely had some, twists and corners and things like that. And there's clearly some block breaks of some sort on the ride, because it was, you can kind of see them hanging on the supports. And get a little bit of over under going on here. Not too much though, since I forget how poorly these are going to maintain their speed, which should not be at all surprising based on what it is. Down. Give it a little bit more speed through. Put our first block break here. I don't look at this as thinking that these were probably too thrilling or exciting or any of that. Maybe they were. It would have been cool to see. I would love to talk to somebody who got to ride the thing and just see what their thoughts were on the ride. But from what I can tell, it had like an out and back type layout, sort of L-shaped overall. A couple of crossovers here and there. We may need a second lift hill. I think you're, in a lot of cases here, you're doing sort of the reverse of a hill. So you're dipping down and then coming back up. So you're keeping the thing kind of up more so, and then dipping down to pick up that speed, get the drop, and then kind of bring it back up top again. And it doesn't look like the cars had too much swing to them. As in, it kind of looks like they were fixed, which, if that's the case, that kind of makes sense. And probably a little bit easier to manage from maintenance standpoint and everything else. But it probably also made the ride super uncomfortable. I want to get another block break in here, but I need some height for it. Get away with this. This into a block. I would love a helix piece for this. I feel like that would make a really nice difference as far as overall layout goes. Up. Once. Oh. We'll put block here. Fill down into it. Brakes. Block. Brakes. Okay, pretty simple deal. Nothing too special going on here. He's almost. Let's do a four car set to begin with. I think this is probably one of the least utilized vehicles in RCT, especially vanilla RCT. I cannot remember the last time that I used these for anything, and really the only people that I see use these for anything are for theming elements rather than actual rides. I think Split Vision was the last one that I saw do something with it, and he, in his Dragon Ball Z park, I was pretty pleased to see it just because it was interesting and unique. The block brakes are running reasonably favorable. So we'll see if this guy can get back before second one gets there, and I don't think he will. Nope. Off by a couple of seconds. Yeah, and that's the thing, is I would imagine that this probably had some technical issues when it got started, and it probably also, if it was a pay per ride, your throughput is really going to dictate how much money you make. Because I'm sure that this is popular. It's just a matter of uptime and how much money can you make with the uptime. And that may not be a good option. So it wouldn't surprise me if there was a lot of factors similar to that as to why this coaster does not exist, aside from Granada Studios going under. So block brakes would need to be adjusted a little bit as far as the spacing of their dispatch goes, but otherwise that'll work. So that's an interesting one. Hopefully it's a new one if you guys hadn't heard about it before. I think it's pretty cool. Alrighty. We are already to our last one, and we are not even hit 3 hours yet. A couple minutes away, so not too bad. We're motoring through. All right, so next up is the Maurer Rides looping coaster. Amazingly enough, this is the only one of these that they did. So this was a it kind of looks like a Schwarzkopf almost, but it is a Stengel engineered ride. This was at Space World in Japan. This is pretty much the whole layout. It's got this beautiful, massive track, and honestly, I think this is one of the prettier coasters as far as just layouts go. I really, really like how you have all these undulating helixes and how everything is just stacked so well to each other. I think it's very, very pretty and very nicely done. Downside is you can't really do this in RCT just because we don't have the helix pieces to do these kind of finer designs, but we'll try something similar and see what we can do. We can get something that looks at least a little bit close. But I always say how important stacking is for rides, and this almost looks like it's taken some keys from portable coasters. So you got like 1, 2, 3 stacks here, 1, 2, 3 stacks here. This whole thing is stacked on this side. This support carries the track below. Pretty impressive. But we're actually on the last one on the list. We're on the Maurer looping coaster. Not to say that we couldn't do some more after this one, but we've been making good time today. This one may take a little bit longer just because I find that these are a little bit difficult to do. But this coaster is since closed and is actually waiting for be rebuilt. At first, some pieces went up to a Rasutsu resort in North Japan, but then the rest of it showed up at Himeji Central Park, which is in Himeji, south of Osaka, or west of Osaka, I suppose. But we're not quite sure where it's going to go, and I'm guessing it's going to take a while if the thing ever goes up again at all, which would be a shame if it didn't. Um, Unfortunately, the ride is um, not very good. So the only reason it's not very good is because these horse collar accordion harnesses that come down on your shoulders. It's kind of similar to how some of the Schwarzkopfs got retrofitted for, and it is a shame because the ride is just not great because of it, because the corners are pretty rough. I did go to Japan specifically for this park because it was closing, and I really, really wanted to ride it. So it this and other rides there, but um, it was a great coaster. So sad to see it sitting on the sidelines. Hopefully, it will come back at some point. Um, but very circular loop. Here's a great shot of it from the Ferris wheel. We've got the first drop into the second drop, which is actually the biggest one. The loop, which is pretty darn near circular. And then, excuse me, you're going through these great knot of helixes. And this one here almost looks like a treble clef coming through there. Really excellent shaping to everything, and it's a good looking ride. All right, so let's go back and see what we can do with this. Now, I had to make some choices on coaster car because we really don't have anything that fits this. I thought about the articulated cars initially because that's how the real thing is. It's got the little individual row cars, but the articulated wooden coaster just doesn't look very good. I mean, it's a Millennium Flyer train, it's obviously so. I'm afraid it just doesn't look great as the ride vehicle for this. So I think the next closest thing is the Schwarzkopf train. So even though I'm not a huge fan of doing it, we're going to use the Schwarzkopf train for the ride. We're also going to use the Schwarzkopf track for the track and get started. So the train itself holds 12 people, so we're going to go with a 6-car train. One of the few times we haven't had to change it around. Okay, fits. These are all about the corners. That's really kind of what it comes down to. Is it's just a corner-based coaster. So this does have a little bit of a pre-drop. So we can either go flat into this, which I think we are going to do. Start running our train just so we can kind of see how bad that speed is, because I'm a little worried about what that's doing overall. We also don't have space for the loop at the moment. Let's see. We'll go ahead and boost this lift hill just a little bit. It is a Japanese coaster, which has notoriously slow lift hills for whatever reason, but for mine a little bit quicker. Yeah, that's generally okay, but I'm still a little bit wary about what we're doing here. Wonder if maybe this is a better option. Want to become famous by followers? I wouldn't recommend you click that. would not recommend. It seems like buying followers kind of defeats the purpose of things, but you know. when the text itself looks like a virus, I feel like, right, just not really trying at that point. All right. So now was the hard part. How do we want to do the loop? So this is going to be a little bit too tall. Ideally, I would set it up like this, I think. But we're not quite tall enough for it. So if I were to do this in a park, I would probably end up, I guess, the quarter loop. Quarter loop is only 5 feet less. I would do that. Or I guess I can't quite do that because it's going to pass through itself, but there's definitely a debate as far as loops that pass through themselves, because yes, it visually passes through it, but B, I also think that can be one of those things that you ignore. I mean, there's plenty of other stuff that we ignore as part of the whole process on these rides, but what we can do is just go slightly taller and make this better. Hide it with trees. Take your main feature of your ride that you can't quite do properly and hide it with trees. That's a good strategy. All right, we will top this off at 100. The corner. Drop this down. We'll do the same kind of approach that we had before. All right, so it's going to look a little bit odd just with the two different parts of the loop, but in my opinion, that's the best way to do a loop for this kind of a ride. It works. Depends if we give it another train or another car. See how 7 goes. Out of the question to say. Another green coaster today. This is the Maurer looping coaster. Well, what makes it better than the usual half loops? I just like that they're a little bit more rounded. I don't like that the half loops A, have a space in between them, so they're 3 across. I'd prefer them to just be 2 across. And B, I don't like that they I just prefer the more circular approach to it, which is kind of where we're at now. That's about the proper hang time for it, actually. So to me, it doesn't look too much different. It doesn't look that's really the only angle where it looks a little bit awkward. It kind of looks like an inclined loop almost. But I get why they have to do it. If you're running a half loop, you got to end it on a tile, so you got to be a full tile over. But I would much prefer there to be an option for a large loop that just sits within 2 tiles and is more properly teardrop shaped and everything. But that's, again, a personal preference kind of a thing. that not everybody may agree with. Exactly. Space shuttle goes there. Okay. So now gotta figure out how to build the rest of it. I think what I want to do is initially we can't sneak this thing through loop. Off on that side. Very Japanese thing to run this thing through the problem is, and you know, we've talked through this before, is that as you look at the ride, you generally build to a certain angle for viewing. This is our RCT thing, not a coaster thing. So you usually build to a certain angle of viewing. As I've been building this is kind of where I'm looking at it. I'm not necessarily building from this angle, or this angle. So if I build this way, you can't really see what this track is doing, and it's a pretty important track because it's threading the loop. So you're not really getting that same kind of look that you might want otherwise. So I think we don't want to do that. Instead, we'll go this way. And ideally, I wanted to get over top there. I don't think I'm going to be able to, just kind of based on how we're up so far. Nice to have those interactions when you can do them, but here we're going to hit that lift hill again if we do. This is one of those rides that I've seen a lot of people try and tackle it, and it's really difficult to do properly. And I've tried a bunch of times too to get a decent layout out of this, and I just never have. So I wanted to do it on stream to kind of like force a layout and see what happens. But it's not an easy one to do by any means. See how we speed. Not too bad. Make a little trough right there for remember that we're using the looping coaster, so we'll go back to that. I always thought this drop on the front side of the station was kind of nice. If we go back to find that aerial view. Yeah, the Space Road one. No worries. Just come and go as you wish. But there's a little drop on the front side of the station. I just thought it was kind of neat the way that it kind of sticks on the other side of the boundary, does its drop, and then comes on back to the other side. I feel like that's kind of a neat little design. Oh, we're trying to emulate here. What are the best hot dog toppings? I'm a bad one to ask about that because I'm pretty plain about it. I prefer just ketchup, maybe onions, maybe some cheese. That's about it. So it is an impressive space shuttle, and it actually is a scale replica of Space Shuttle Columbia. So it was a fully built scale replica of the Space Shuttle Columbia, made from plans that the park had obtained from NASA, um, and it was super cool. Actually, this park in general, if you've listened to enough of my streams, you probably heard me gush about this park a lot because I really had a good time, and I am really kind of gutted that it doesn't exist anymore. Like, it was a beautiful park that clearly had been neglected over the years and seen a lot better days, but man, it was a one of a kind, super cool park that I really wish was still around. Um, it had an interesting kind of optimism about it that you kind of got from, say, World's Fair parks and things like that, that I just you don't see at other parks, in my opinion. So it was such a cool place to be and see. And it kills me a little bit that it's gone. But it wasn't making money, and that's what comes down to it. So the land was more valuable than the park was. We're building ourselves into a little bit of a corner here because I don't think I can get out of here. This, which I can't. Can do that. Can do that. Wonder. Do this. There we go. Now we can cross this. Make that our return run. However we get there, when we do get there. Gonna take a lot to cross this spot here, I think. Yeah, that's kind of the biggest thing, is that the ride looks good from one angle, and one angle alone. I saved this one to last because I figured it would have probably the most frustration to it, um, which I don't know if it did, because that Aquatrax was really a pain. I'm not quite sure how to do it better, but I wish that we had some slightly better options for diagonal track in the game. Like, I don't know what that looks like. I suppose. The biggest part that I'm trying to pay attention to right now is how to sure we stack this. Yeah, Ride Play, I think you're spot on, is that some variety of diving, climbing, helix piece or diagonal pieces would really put us over the edge. But you end up kind of how I'm getting this set up with a bunch of things that don't quite line up. So I'm been happy with how this lines up right here. Not quite happy with how the rest of it does. But yeah, just the ability to, I mean, and maybe it is because we only have one angle worth of diagonal, and it's the largest diameter corner that we have among the four corner sizes. So some ability to do something there where we say, okay, this option provides us with a little bit more cornering space. Okay, that is into the stations. Can't quite. One of the thoughts a second ago was, well, went all the way over here. I could come up and do this part of a helix. Interesting that it let me place that helix. I wouldn't have expected that. Yeah, and I mean, it's one of those things where I feel like, I mean, the diagonals are so important, and if you don't have the diagonals, the rides look weird, like, in a lot of ways. I think you really have to have diagonals for good looking coasters in this game. Um, but I, I just wish there was some better options for kind of the rest of this stuff. Then you end up with all the clearance issues as they are. Because to me, I look at this, and from all the angles, I don't see that as an issue. The game tells me that it is. So, I think in this instance, I'm going to go with it. I feel like it's not an issue. I don't typically support that, but now how do I get back over here? Uh, Oh, really? Oh, man. We're screwing the system once, we're going to do it again. That may be a little tight here. And 10, 5, that is a little tight. Oh no, am I going to be off by one? I got to do the whole. Bleh, that looks bad. Not totally feeling this, although I am feeling the way that it comes together, but not quite feeling. That feels a good deal smoother. Right, though. No, I'm not opposed to going all the way out to the lift. I mean, and at this point, you could just say that it's nested. Here with. A little bit of diagonal corner or diagonal brake run. So we have a little bit worth of wrench here. Not awful. Not the finest of looking layouts, and the big thing that I was talking about, how it needs to look good from the one angle, I'm not entirely certain that it does. I do like this helix here. That probably feels like the best one that we've done so far. And I don't mind this sequence here. The return run is not bad, maybe a little bit much, but I'll go with it. We will call that neat. Wrap up our finer details here. Green track. With the green rails. Station's awfully tight, but hey, Hydro. Yeah, I'm a fan of it. I know it's not everybody's favorite way to go about it, but I think it does look good. Just because I really wish that there was an option for a quarter loop sized loop that was essentially round, that was offset by one angle. I mean, maybe that's a future thing, but yeah, speed the ride is especially elongated. That's got a weird one going on. Break, 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 and block. Here, similar. brake, and lock. Only going to run the 2 trains here, even though we can do 3 according to the block system, but there's really no reason to do 3. So that's our kind of attempt at it, which I don't know if it's necessarily the best, but it's close enough, I'll say, to kind of achieve what we're looking to do. Take a ride, let's see how it holds up. Oh, they did revert back to 6-car trains. Let me... go to 7. I need some more station. Perhaps. Fine with me. Always do a tight corner at the beginning and then this. I only got 1 ride on this while we were over there at Space World because the operations were so terrible that it just took forever. We were lucky enough to get the 1 ride on it between this one and Titan Max, the other big coaster there. Was pretty horrendous operationally. I'm happy that we at least got the 1 on Titan, but I wish we could have had a little bit more time. I would have liked the second day there to be able to do more things at leisure and repeat things, but can't always get what you want. Happy to have gotten over there and bought out a bunch of merchandise and all sorts of other fun stuff. Right, that's a pretty good interaction there with the brake run, crossing over some of those bits. I don't hate it by any means. I could see coming up and doing one final helix around in the other direction. I wonder, just save just to and I want to see about another thought here. Usually these don't pan out, so not expecting much out of this. Too big. I'd like it to be tighter in. 1510, so that's not going to have the clear. Oh, jeez, that's right through the track. Nope. The rest of the. Actually, it does more or less put us underneath of that track there, which does accomplish the goal of trying to stack ride track. That gets us back to how tight this was original. Oop. That. Clean it up. Here we go. 2, 3 into brakes. That, and then I do want 1 brake here. Reduce this to a small corner. The whole train will fit on that section. Okay. That adds a little bit more excitement to the end of it. Not necessarily the most compact thing, but I think it comes back to the inability of diagonal brake or diagonal track to do anything tight with the way that the corner radii goes. If there was a better way to do that, then perhaps it would be easier to do something. But that last helix ends up being gigantic and also too low, so I'd probably just lower that entire landscape around there. I do kind of like that first corner. It has some pretty good, or the first corner after the loop, it's got some pretty good pep through that. The long layout, which real thing is reasonably long. 3,400 feet is pretty long for a ride of this size lift hill. And it's still got the speed towards the end, so I'm comfortable with that. I think that makes things a little bit nicer overall. So we will stick with that. Just our sizing on that, or timing on the brakes. All right, call this number 9. All right, well, let's review since that is our last one. Okay, so we started out with Lightning Run doing a Chance Hyper GTX coaster. Pretty happy with how this one turned out. Real short lift hill, but a lot of nice corners. Good directional changes, despite the fact that we can't bank the corkscrew track. I think it looks pretty decent, and some nice airtime over those hills at the end. Next up was Atlantis Adventure, the aquatrax from Intamin. This one crashed early on, and we couldn't figure out why because we didn't see it. We changed the massing on the ride, so it ends up having some kind of weird pacing issues, which are broken now. Of course they are. That's why it broke. Have it. Okay, I do. Copy paste. Need to spawn it first. Yeah, that's one way to do it. Just when your failed launch creates a crash, that's not good. All right, so that's about the speed that it was going on the real thing, which isn't correct. It's a bad adjustment. Now we spent a long time screwing around with massing on this ride, and because I just haven't played with changing mass on coasters before, and I wish there was a little bit more information about how to properly fine tune the thing, or even a baseline for all the coasters, so that it's more easily you can more easily change things and kind of know what they're going to do. At this point, it just kind of seems like a big mystery of throwing numbers in, but it operates and it does the main things that an Aquatrax has. It's got the launch, it's got the lift hill, it's got the water splash type elements. We have a top hat in there, a bunch of corners. I think I'm not happy with this layout. Like of all the actual coasters in this stream, this is probably the one that I'm least happy about. So I'd like to redo it, and I probably will play around with it at some point to see if there's a better way to do something for this one. So, not the worst, but not the best either. The next one we had was the Intamin Fly Rider, which, pretty straightforward here, but it is the only one in the world, and it's pretty interesting as far as that goes. Worth changing the track, I think, just to add a little bit more oomph and heft to it. Seeing if you can get the impulse coaster track to give it some support, perhaps. We don't have the right trains for it, but it's close enough to recreate this. And that, I think, really the only reason that I wanted to show this, just in case you didn't know about the real coaster, I think it's interesting, and B, it's a good option for like a replacement for an impulse coaster in your park if you want something different, some variety to it. After that, we went to another Intamin wing coaster. We went to the Furious Baco type layout, which we already did one of these in another stream, but I figured we'd do it again since this is the only Intamin wing rider coaster. Exceptionally fast launch on the real thing. So we're dealing with a lot of speed throughout. which is not ideal, and I'd probably adjust the mass a little bit so that this thing slowed down a little faster over time. The other challenge is that we don't have a strung out inversion, so this roll here looks incredibly stupid, and I'm sure it's probably killed my. Amazingly enough, not killed the intensity too much that I would have expected, but similar kind of design to the real thing. Actually, it's got a little bit more layout than the real one does, if you can believe that. But um, it's not bad, but it's an interesting ride, and I wish that more Intamins were sold. But based on the reports of the ride quality, it's not surprising that not too many have been out there. All right, then before break, we did Tulareki at Lin and Maki. This is a Mack E-Motion coaster, which is more or less a Gerstlauer bobsled coaster that's got some cars that can rock back and forth a little bit. We use the Skyrocket trains from Space K because that best looks like the real thing. Pretty short layout. Actually, this might be a little bit short, but it accomplishes the goal of what these rides do. So it's pretty small, have some flat wild mouse type corners, and then does drops here and there, diving corners, a couple of little airtime bits, and then a couple of block breaks to keep things moving. This whole stream ended up really being about capacity issues, which I think points to one of the reasons why these are one-of-a-kind rides, because they have capacity issues. Next up is the Tower Launch Coaster from Zierer. So this is based on Wicked at Lagoon. So we have not only a horizontal launch, but we have a vertical launch in the form of a chain lift up the tower, which is like the real thing does. A little bit of airtime hill here. Pacing actually works pretty darn well on this one, even though the real thing's got some block brake or some trim brakes here. We don't need them. The second half is a little bit droll. I wanted this crossover here, and that's kind of neat the way that they pass each other. But I think you could easily get away with putting a corkscrew in there or some other stuff if you wanted to do it. You just have to watch out about train mass, just because they're small trains. You have some overall difficulty for the whole thing, but pretty happy with it. Feels like it matches the real life ride pretty well. Okay, next up was the Vekoma Wild Mouse, the one-of-a-kind from Idlewild up in Pennsylvania, formerly of European fame. So we're using the El Loco cars, just because I feel like those are the ones that can best do all the motions, like the banked lift hill, which is a weird element on the real thing. A couple banked corners here also, and then some drops and things. This is one of those where I could almost forgive you if you didn't want to use block brakes, because the block brakes kind of kill the speed overall. We're a little bit narrow compared to the real thing, I think. That's definitely long, so I feel like the length is correct, but a little bit narrow perhaps. So some adjustments can be made there. I almost wish there was a specific piece for a hairpin corner that fit across 3 tiles, like a 3x2 corner or something, because I feel like that might be a little bit better of a look for some of these. And there it goes again. That's the same spot the other one crashed in. So I wonder. So it looks like it got held up by the block brakes. I bet that's what happened. I bet this one got held up by the block brakes. This one shot through it. Yeah, I'm kind of thinking that might have been what happened, is that this one of the brakes didn't grab it properly, and or are there two? There might be 2 sets of blocks here. Let's see. No, just the one. But it could have It could have passed through this block brake here, and then headed into that side. But either way, we're gonna go ahead and crash this one at some point, and we will go there. It is a 2-hit wonder. Womp womp. So, all right. Was the mouse. Okay, then we had our one oddity coaster, just to talk about something that maybe people don't know about. This is Skytrak at Granada Studios in the UK. This one was there for a year or less with a lot of maintenance problems. It was a one-off thing. The world's first flying coaster. So pretty interesting, but also not successful, clearly. We did ours with a couple of blocks in there. We do need to adjust the timings for it if we were to run this. I think the block spacing is about right, just with the timings adjusted a little bit. It could be a little bit better. Either way. Then our finale coaster was over here. Was Venus GP from Space World, our Maurer Sohne looping coaster. And kind of got the parts and pieces right. You got your parallel tracks, the stacked elements, and helixes and things like that. So didn't do it quite perfectly, but I don't think you can do this to the same extent in RCT, just based on the lack of ability to have, or lack of piece availability. So it goes. I think we're all right there. But anyway, that is everything for today. A much smaller footprint than last week's or 2 weeks ago's long coaster stream. Well, you could build catwalks if you wanted. If you wanted to go through with a wooden coaster and just run through the whole darn thing, you could have your weirdly ugly catwalks on the whole thing. Yeah, awkward one for sure. It's a gigantic track. It would be kind of neat to have like a toggle catwalks button, and it would basically be like the 4D coaster lift hill, where you could toggle that on and off just for any track piece. That could be pretty cool, like toggle catwalk left and right. And that gets into some no limits type stuff, but it would be neat to have that ability. Anybody ever wanted to draw all those pieces on the track element, but I think we'll be seeing that anytime soon. So anyway, we are done for today. I think we'll be going back to sort of the every 2 weeks approach that we've been doing the last couple of weeks. I am working on a couple of new new stream ideas, so we're going to look at maybe traveling coasters at one point. I'm kind of looking at like weird oddball type coasters, so like coaster oddities, and just some other things to keep it fresh, because as we're through 12 of these plus 3 special streams where we've done a lot of the coasters, it doesn't hurt to build them again in different ways, but I want to keep the variety coming and also keep teaching about interesting rides that are out there that you may not be familiar with. So hopefully you learned something out of this one. If you're not a subscriber to the YouTube channel, go check it out, because it's definitely worth doing for that, because this is where I post all of the archival footage of this plus all my other streams and video recordings. So go do that. It's free. So just subscribe, so then you can get that information. Follow on here, and then you'll get a notification whenever I go live, in case you missed the post on the Discord. If you want to help support the stream too, you can subscribe here. If you're an Amazon Prime member, you can do it for free. But feel free to do that. I always appreciate the support and just the viewership in general, to help keep these things going, since it's a little bit of a commitment. But I'm pretty happy with the response so far, and I think from what I hear, you guys are enjoying it. So happy to have all of that. Like I said, that's all for today, and hope you enjoyed it. I'll have this one posted up on the YouTube channel here in a couple hours once I do some editing on it, and then we'll be back with more stuff. I do want to get back to our hacking park. Hydra, your post remembered that, or reminded me of that, because we haven't done a hack tutorial video for a while, and I've actually got a bunch of stuff sitting there ready to go, so I just need to record the video of me building it. And honestly, there's been some new stuff over the years, or not years, feels like it's been years, but some new plugins since then. So we have the Edit Ride Vehicles plugin now, which lets us change all sorts of stuff. And we also have the Scenery Manager, which just came out, and I'm super jazzed about, because that's going to really revolutionize how easy it is to do big things and be able to just move stuff if you put it in the wrong spot or anything like that. So feeling very happy about that. So in there, so we need the Ring of Fire. Perhaps we'll see how it comes at some point. There's we're gonna do the catapult first, and then we'll do the Ring of Fire kind of similarly based on what we do for the catapult, or the catapult based on, yeah, no, I said that right the first time. But yeah, Ride Play, if you haven't seen this one yet, it's on the open RCT thing. So let me just do an example here of so here's some scenery down. So this new scenery manager lets you select an area, copy that area, then paste it all around. And you can rotate it, you can mirror it, and you can do offset height. It is a game changer. It is a huge game changer. You can also save them and yeah, just really do a whole lot with it. Yeah, it's the same thing as the Super Loop thing. I know there's plenty of them out there in various parks. I know there's been a couple in DK contests so far, but it's basically that. Yeah, same deal. And I'm going to do the hack the same way that they have. I've got, let's see, I'm trying to think of what all I have built already. There's at least 5. There's at least 5 hacks that I've got ready to go, and then there are another, couple beyond that. Actually, let's here. What I'll do is save this one, and then as a closing parting gift for all of you for being here, and then anybody who is watching this on YouTube and has decided that they want to watch the whole thing, we will get a sneak peek of the hacking park and what is to come. So, see that I am currently testing some other options here, some barren curves and things like that. Also a top spin. What's going to be coming up next is the whip ride here using the Millennium Flyer trains. So we're just going to do a simple track split and put back together with some spacing in there. So that's going to be a big, nice little one there. Then we also have the Maurer Sky Loop here, where the ride goes around, comes up, stalls out, goes back around, goes back up, and then slowly backs into the station again. So we'll do that hack. We have the oh, they're glitching all to hell right now. We have the Zierer jet skis ride right here. So that one will be coming along here pretty soon. And then we also have the catapult ride. Now they're all glitching. If you have a bunch of custom stuff in your park, when you transfer parks without closing the game, sometimes they manifest as glitched items like that. So it's just something that you get. Here's my catapult, which I'm very proud of how the hack turned out for this one. So this is a first of its kind. There have been other catapults, but not like this one, as far as the operations go of the thing. And yeah, I will certainly give you a shout out for your Six Flags Over Texas. I need to go look at it actually, and just note how you guys did it, because there's a bunch of different ones out there, and I want to see how everybody did theirs before we go too far. So here we go, stalling on that one, and then it's going to back through, and then it will park itself, or it stalls out once more. I hate these hacks that require timing, but it makes it work all right. But yeah, Zara's is great, and he certainly is one of the champions of hacking at the moment, and he knows what's going on. Man, they got a lot of flipping the that's not right. This is the latest one that we did. Then we'll go do the rest of our fun other stuff here we had. So that's a nice little park, but we ought to finish and grow it here at some point soon. But let's leave it here, and we will call it a day. So again, thank you all very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. If you have suggestions for stuff you'd like to see, feel free to let me know. If you have parks you want reviewed or anything like that, send them over. And I will see you around the Discords, and then we'll be back in 2 weeks for another Andrelczyk Amusement Academy. So thank you guys very much for watching, and have a great day.